Nike, a global leader in the sports footwear and apparel industry, has experienced its fair share of success and controversy. One of the most significant scandals in the company's history involves its use of sweatshop labor in the 1990s. The scandal not only damaged Nike's reputation, but also sparked a wider discussion about the ethical implications of globalization and the responsibilities of multinational corporations to prevent labor abuses. Today, we will delve into the background of the Nike sweatshop scandal, its impact on the company and the industry, and ongoing efforts to address the issue of sweatshop labor in the global supply chain. The origins of the scandal. Nike's rise to prominence during the 1980s and early 1990s was characterized by aggressive marketing campaigns, profitable endorsement deals with high-profile athletes, and an expanding global production network. To reduce costs and maximize profits, the company turned to contract factories in countries like Indonesia, China, and Vietnam, where labor was inexpensive and regulations were minimal. By outsourcing production to these nations, Nike could exploit low wages, long working hours, and limited labor protections. In the early 1990s, investigative reports and exposés began to reveal the harsh reality of life inside Nike's overseas factories. Journalists and activists uncovered evidence of widespread labor abuses, including inadequate wages, excessive working hours, unsafe working conditions, child labor, and harassment and abuse by factory supervisors and managers.
Group organized outside of Nike stores.
The revelations of Nike's sweatshop labor practices provoked anger and criticism from consumers, activists, and the media. The company faced numerous protests, boycotts, and negative publicity, jeopardizing its brand image and market share. Nike's stock price plummeted, and sales growth slowed considerably in the late 1990s. To address the growing pressure and repair its tarnished reputation, Nike took several steps. The company established a code of conduct for its suppliers, outlining minimum standards for wages, working hours, and working conditions. It also created a corporate responsibility division to oversee compliance with these standards and engage with stakeholders on labor and environmental issues. Nike partnered with independent organizations such as the Fair Labor Association and the Global Alliance for Workers and Communities to conduct audits of its factories and verify compliance with its code of conduct. In a groundbreaking move, Nike released a list of its factories in 2005, becoming one of the first companies to publicly disclose supply chain information. Nike implemented various programs aimed at improving worker well-being in its supply chain. These initiatives focused on health and safety, education, and skill development. Nike began engaging with governments, industry groups, and non-governmental organizations to promote labor rights and fair working conditions in the global supply chain. Despite these efforts, Nike's reputation suffered significant damage due to the sweatshop scandal. The public outcry over the company's labor practices forced other brands and industries to examine their own supply chains for potential exploitation. This scrutiny led to a broader conversation about the ethics of globalization and the responsibilities of multinational corporations in ensuring fair and ethical working conditions for their employees. The Nike sweatshop scandal marked a turning point in how multinational corporations approach labor practices in their supply chains. It underscored the need for transparency, accountability, and collaboration among stakeholders to address systematic labor abuses. As a result, other major brands in the apparel industry, such as Adidas and Puma, followed suit and implemented their own labor and environmental standards. While progress has been made, the global apparel industry continues to face challenges related to labor rights, fair wages, and worker safety. Public scrutiny and activism remain essential in holding companies like Nike accountable for their actions and promoting positive change in the industry. The scandal highlighted the need for increased corporate accountability, proactive engagement with stakeholders, and the importance of continuous improvement in addressing labor and environmental issues in the supply chain. Over the past 2 decades, there has been a growing awareness of the need for more sustainable and ethical practices in the global apparel industry. Various initiatives have emerged, such as the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which developed the Higg Index to measure the environmental and social performance of apparel companies. Additionally, the Environmental Labor Organization has established the Better Work Program, aimed at improving working conditions in garment factories worldwide. Despite these advancements, the fight against sweatshop labor and exploitation in the global supply chain is far from over. Consumers play a crucial role in driving change by demanding transparency, voting with their wallets, and supporting brands that prioritize ethical and sustainable practices. By doing so, they can create market incentives for companies to invest in responsible sourcing and production practices. Lastly, it is essential for corporations themselves to recognize the long-term benefits of adopting sustainable and ethical practices. These benefits include not only mitigating reputational risks, but also improving employee satisfaction and retention, enhancing brand loyalty, and fostering innovation. The Nike sweatshop scandal is a stark reminder of the potential consequences that multinational corporations can face when they disregard the ethical and social dimensions of their operations. As we reflect on the lessons learned from the Nike sweatshop scandal, it is crucial to recognize that the responsibility to create a fair and just global supply chain lies with all stakeholders, from multinational corporations to consumers. In the years since the scandal, corporate social responsibility has become a more prominent concern in boardrooms around the world, and companies are increasingly recognizing the importance of ethical supply chains. To maintain the momentum of change, it is essential that we continue to push for transparency and accountability, demanding that companies demonstrate their commitment to improving labor conditions and respecting human rights. Nike's sweatshop scandal has had far-reaching implications, both for the company itself and the broader global apparel industry. The scandal served as a wake-up call for businesses worldwide, highlighting the importance of ethical supply chains and the potential consequences of neglecting social responsibility. By learning from this experience and working collaboratively, all stakeholders can contribute to creating a more just, sustainable, and ethical supply chain for generations to come.